Hello, English 310 folks. My name is Anna Mary Williford. I'm one of the librarians here at Carmichael Library at the University of Montevallo. And Sheila Brandt, another one of our librarians, and myself have put together a few videos for you to help you navigate the research guide for this class, which you'll need to complete your assignments. I just wanted to mention quickly how you can get in touch with us. So one way is whether you want to talk to us or any of the librarians. If you are on the library homepage, I'll just click back there for a moment. We have a chat feature. The box in the upper right-hand corner here will tell you the chat hours for the day. So if we're online with chat, you can always click that button and ask the question in real time. You can use the email link below here, which goes to all the librarians' email addresses, and whoever sees it first will get back to you, usually whoever's on chat duty the next morning. And then clicking back over to the research guide on the home page here, if you scroll down a bit on the right column here, there's me, Anna Mary Williford, here's Sheila. You can email either of us directly from these links. So lots of ways to get in touch if you have questions after watching these videos. So this video on the homepage is meant to just kind of guide you through the resources and the links that are on this page, which will help you find out information about banned books in general, maybe some background information about your books, and how to find newspaper articles for the case that you choose to write about. And then on the other tabs, which Dr. Webb will direct you to, Sheila has made videos about how to actually find children's books here and search in the catalog. So on this homepage, there's a lot of links, but they're all good. So kind of take a look and see what's here. The first thing probably that jumps out at you maybe is the video right here in the middle. So this is Pat Scales, who we're super lucky to have as an alum in our Montevallo family. So she worked her career as, I believe, a middle school and high school librarian. But in addition to working in school libraries, she also got really active with the American Library Association, specifically regarding intellectual freedom, which is anti-censorship. And she became kind of a national expert on that people would call on if they had a really big censorship case in their school or their district or their community. And she would come in kind of as an expert witness to say, why censorship is bad and why we shouldn't ban books. So this is a video here of a speech by her, but we also have a lot of resources by her in our collection. And there's a link to one of those right here. She writes a column in Library Journal, I believe, School Library Journal, which also there's a couple books over here that she's written. But also the majority, like the vast majority of the children's books that we have here in our collection at Carmichael were donated by her. And she still donates things regularly. So we're super lucky to have her. She's a great resource. She's also created a lot of great resources, some of which are linked on this page for you to check out. If you are trying to figure out which banned book you want to read and you just kind of want to get an idea of like what's been banned and maybe why and what's out there, this top left box is probably where you want to start. So there's links here that are going to show you where to find lists of banned books, maybe why books have been banned or challenged. And you'll see as we go through these that it really varies widely. Some of the books that you see on this list, and you'll know kind of just instinctively like why those might have been challenged, but some of the reasons like get pretty obscure. So this first link here is the banned or challenged top 100 novels of the 20th century and why. So, and these really are just novels, so other kinds of books won't show up here. But if you are particularly interested in so a lot of these, when they do get banned or challenged, it's in the context of like high school literature classes, where people don't want their students reading those for whatever reason. And so lots of these books have been around for decades, and so they've been challenged for decades. Like this one right here, Brave New World, it was banned in Ireland all the way back in 1932. It's been challenged ever since. Here's even a challenge from Alabama, an Alabama school. So if you're looking at a novel specifically and you kind of want to see like over the years why it might have ended up on those lists, that's a resource for you to check out. these two links here, though, so the notable First Amendment court cases, so those are, when if a book challenge gets all the way up to that court level, which usually doesn't happen. But the next two links, the top 10 frequently most challenged book lists of the 21st century, right? So those are the more recent ones. So this is where you want to focus in on, what has been challenged recently and why. And so these are listed by year, right, with the most recent year first. Top most challenged books of 2022, of course, isn't up here yet because 2022 isn't over yet. The American Library Association is the organization that kind of compiles these and puts them together. So 2021 is our most recent. And you can see they give you, again, the top 10. But they also give you a little bit of information about that year in general, right? So in 2021, there were 729 challenges to materials, and that included 1,597 books, which I can guarantee you that if we scroll down here through other years, that's a lot more than would be. So even just compared to 1 year before, 2020, only 156 challenges to 273 books. So that right there is a pretty good reflection of the times we're living in and the way that books are under fire. So this assignment that you're doing is like especially timely, just given everything that's going on. But the other thing is that you'll kind of notice when you look at the lists of the top most challenged book, a lot of times there's, themes, like thematic kind of connections between them. Like all of these first three were banned or challenged for LGBTQIA content and sexually explicit images or passageways. A lot of times race is an issue, police violence. And a lot of times the reasons, the list of books that were banned in a particular year can really reflect like whatever was going on in society at any given time, So years when there's been a lot of, riots or protests or like police brutality has been a thing, a lot of books in those categories come under fire, maybe because, they're being promoted more, so they're more on people's radars or for whatever reason. This one right here, The Absolutely True Diary of a Part-Time Indian by Sherman Alexie is interesting because it was banned. Okay, so some of the reasons are the text, but then also sexual misconduct by the author himself. And later, or earlier, I should say, on one of these other lists is the series of books by Bill Cosby. Of course, it's not coming up right now. But the year that, oh yeah, here it is, from 2016, the Little Bill series written by Bill Cosby, because of the allegations against him. So sometimes it's not even the content of the book itself, but it's just, if the author, it turns out is not a great person, then those aren't things that we want to necessarily be promoting, right? So, and sometimes even too, there's been at least a couple of cases where I guess usually when you think of book challenges, you think of parents or, community members bringing it forward, but sometimes the students, like in the case of the Sherman Alexie book, there was at least one case where the students actually were like, there's lots of other good things out there to read. We shouldn't have to read and be graded on a book by this person who did all these bad things. So that's kind of interesting too. So whichever book you choose, when you look at the challenges for it, just, don't be surprised. You can find a lot of really kind of varied things, like I said. But for sure, these top 10 lists from year to year will kind of show you like whatever trends were going on at that time. And so again, these are only 10 books. There were almost 1,600 books that were targeted last year. So these are the top 10 and why, but obviously there's lots beyond that. So if there's a book in particular that you know of, you could kind of do a Google search of it and see if any challenges or bannings pop up and sort of follow it from there. Another really good, cool thing about the ALA site here is that when you click this, they also give you links to, so for every year, there's the top 10 most challenged books and kind of why and stuff. And then somewhere, maybe it's on the other page, there's also infographics that kind of show you like what was going on at that time. So again, there's lots of links on all of these pages, but kind of just make sure you click through them and really see. And so, and some of these, again, kind of might surprise you. So where challenges take place, almost, at least in this past year, almost half were at school libraries, about a little over a third were from public libraries, 18% schools. So the difference between those is school libraries would be like books that were in the library, whereas schools means stuff that was in the curriculum. So, I mean, it might have been in the library too, but it was challenged specifically as part of the curriculum. And then only 1% is academic or other libraries, like special libraries, things like that. So here at in higher education, we get kind of sheltered from that a lot. Like definitely the majority of kind of the turmoil and friction as far as censorship and book challenges and bannings goes happens at this level instead. But it's still good, obviously, for us to be aware of it. And over here, for the 729 challenges that happened in 2021, they kind of break it down as to what type of books they were, or where they were challenged, all kinds of different reasons. Again, you can sort of see certain words and things pop out that were used more often than others. And this I always think is interesting too, like sort of who initiated the challenges. So you can see most of the ones from last year were from parents, so almost 40%. 24% is patrons, which that's more probably like people that go to public libraries. So those are probably like the public library kind of challenges. 18% were from a school board or administration. 10% were political or religious groups, and not necessarily affiliated with the school or library or whatever. 6% came from librarians and teachers, which is very interesting. 2% elected officials and 1% students. Like I said, sometimes students speak out to you and say, hey, for whatever reason, we shouldn't be looking at this. And so I'll just pull up this page real quick, and this gives you sort of a closer look at all of those things. So anyway, that's not necessarily gonna factor into your paper, but just again, if you're sort of trying to get your mind wrapped around, how book challenges happen and why, that's a good resource to look at. Okay, I'm gonna close these tabs and go back to the homepage and click here on the most frequently challenged books by decade. And so again, this is similar to the list we just looked at, except that since it's by decade, it's even more, you can see more overarching kind of themes. And so I'll click on the decade, the most recent decade, which was the 2010s. And again, you'll see some books that have been around for a long time and they pop up on every single list over and over. And then there's some that really, they just maybe were around for a short time and then kind of fell off the radar. But again, Sherman Alexie is there, Captain Underpants, because I don't know, some grown-ups don't like bathroom humor, I guess. So some of these, again, not surprising, or at least you can kind of look at it, or if you know about it and it's pretty obvious to you, it might have been banned or challenged. But if you see a book on this list that you're like, why in the world would somebody challenge or want to ban that? Usually, if you can't find it on the ALA site, if you just Google it, like Google, I don't know, let's say A Clockwork Orange. Google A Clockwork Orange censorship or book challenge or whatever, and usually it'll come up again, especially if it's one of those older classic ones that's been challenged over and over through the decades. But if even it's a newer one, and especially if it's a newer one, there's probably more recent like news articles and things going on. So you can get a lot of good information that way too. Okay, so that's the 100 most frequently challenged books by decade. And again, you can kind of just get a sense from there of the more challenged it was, the more likely you probably are to find stuff about it. But even if something was only challenged once or twice, if it was a big story, or you can find articles from the local paper at the time. Another piece of advice that I give students in this class working on this assignment is that sometimes, okay, so I mentioned, the court cases up here and how that's really pretty rare for a book banning or challenging to go all the way to the courts. Usually it's settled within a school district or, within like the board of a public library, if it's a public library. So if you know of a certain case that got mentioned in the news, maybe, but it didn't have details, if it was a school district, go to the school district's website, and look for school board minutes, or go to the library portion of the website. And most libraries are going to have like their selection criteria or policy posted, and then also hopefully the procedure that they follow when a book is challenged, or someone complains about it. So there's supposed to be like a due process that happens where, if somebody makes a complaint or challenges something, then there's a procedure in place where it's reviewed, and people, look at different sides of the argument and then ultimately decide what to do with it. Obviously, that doesn't always happen, right? And sometimes even if there is a policy in place, it still doesn't happen. And so, sometimes those things kind of happen in secret behind closed doors, and they never end up in minutes or anything. But it's at least a good place to start. So if you're kind of looking for things, and also, if nothing else, if you know of a particular case and it really interests you, but you can't find a lot of information about it, you could email the a librarian or teacher, or like whoever it was in either the public library or the school district where that took place, and they might be willing to give you more information. So just some suggestions on kind of places you could start. And then the other thing is, okay, so besides the background information and where to find stuff about, what books were banned and why, there is, and also I just want to mention real quickly our Banned Books Week site, right? And there's a lot of resources in the library for that. And so if you click on that, it will tell you more information. But once you're ready to start finding sources about the case that you've chosen, the book you've chosen, and like the instance that you have picked. And also, before I forget to mention, on the author's website, if it's, obviously, not if it's like Fahrenheit 451 that the author has been deceased for a long time, but if it's a modern book where the author is still living, a lot of times the authors take that very personally and they get really involved in whatever challenge is going on. So Richard Peck now has passed away, but when what his maybe the last book he wrote, it was definitely like one of the later ones, when it was challenged because of homosexuality in it, he was really outspoken about that, and like publicly made statements, and there was information on his website and stuff like that. So that can also be a good resource for you too. So in addition to looking at websites of the school district or library where the case happened, if it's a more recent book, or if the author is still living, look at their page too, or the publisher website or something like that. And if it's one that got a lot of attention, chances are it'll end up there too. But as far as like articles wise, okay, so I mentioned the notable First Amendment court cases, which you probably won't choose a book that would show up in those, but these can kind of be good information about the type of arguments that are made on either side, and then again particularly like the intellectual freedom folks that are arguing in favor of free speech. And then here are like articles from the New York Times having to do with censorship, including like archival articles, commentary, so some older stuff you can find there. The ALA's Office for Intellectual Freedom is kind of their division that specifically deals with, free speech and anti-censorship and all of that. And they have some links on here somewhere. There's, okay, so they have a YouTube channel. They have, of course, information about Banned Books Week that happens in the fall. Okay, here's the blog. So the blog too, again, especially if it was like a really recent case, which, right now, like every day there's a new case, it seems like. So there's a lot of good resources on here too. And again, if you pick one that's kind of happened recently and was high profile, chances are it probably ended up in their blog. And that can be good information too. Okay, so the Office for Intellectual Freedom website is worth checking out. The articles from the New York Times. Oh, here's a direct link to that journal too. So, oh no, this is the journal, I'm sorry. So the first one was the blog, and this one they actually have a publication that comes out about it. So that can be worth searching as well. And it is freely available online, so you can look at it through your library. And then the Freedom to Read Foundation is just another anti-censorship thing. Then these two things these two links at the top here, Newspaper Source and ProQuest Newspapers, those are both places that you could go to look up articles about whatever it is that you've chosen. And so here, sometimes it can get tricky, right? Because if you put in just the title of a book, again, especially if it's like a well-known or more recent one, you might come up with like reviews about the book or the movie or whatever. So sometimes if you put in the title of the book, and also put in things like censorship or challenge or banning or I don't know, burning in these days, because that has happened too, that will maybe help you kind of key in on those things. And so here we see, so this is actually like an editorial by Judy Blume way back in the 90s in the New York Times. Judy Blume is definitely no stranger to censorship. So she and Pat Scales are actually really good friends, because they bonded over their mutual struggles against censorship. And so when you're looking for newspapers, this is kind of like what you want to follow. So again, here is a case where J.K. Rowling said that, she's anti-censorship and supportive about other people to write about her novels. But in this case, she's saying that somebody has like plundered it and just repurposed it. But the judge said that it was, and so that person was a former school librarian, which is interesting. And the judge says that it's gibberish, and sounds like maybe that's not going to go in her favor. So that's not technically like a banning per se, but it still is interesting. And here is an article about banned books in general, but sometimes you can find information about cases in there. So searching in the newspaper databases, and then also here, let's do the ProQuest search too, just to kind of compare them. I'll do an advanced search. You can see that this looks a lot different. Okay. And so there are kind of different things here. And some of it is, okay, so in this case, it's a film that was being censored, and that's a lot of books that are banned or challenged fly under the radar until they get turned into films. Okay, obviously Harry Potter never really flew under the radar, or at least not for very long. But something like 13 Reasons Why, which as a book didn't get banned or challenged nearly as much as after the Netflix series came out, and then that really got a lot of attention to the suicide scene and things, and so then it ended up on the radars of a lot of parents who maybe didn't want it in the school library anymore. Again, here is something again about Judy Blume, and she's talking about kind of what I just said. So like the more popular something is, the more it's on the radar of bannings and challenges. So there, so anyways, hopefully you get the idea kind of what is out here. And so like here's one from USA Today about this specific, so in Zeeland, Michigan, the school district there barred all classrooms from reading Harry Potter and removed them from the libraries. And it looks like community members kind of like rallied against that. So that's interesting too. So again, sometimes, okay, so if this was, one that you were interested in looking at, so the town, so you could look up the school district there, and roughly the date when it happened. So then you could go to Google and kind of check there for that. So if you're running into trouble finding articles about, again, a specific banning or challenge, try Googling, if you only know a little bit of information about it, like where it happened and when or why, look for those things and either, look in local newspapers if you can, if they're freely readable, or go to school district websites, library websites, things like that. And again, if all else fails, definitely come and ask the librarians for help, and we are happy to come help you look. So this one just caught my eye. So in this case, in Arkansas, the books were taken away, but then a federal judge ruled that they can be made available again. So here's a case where it did go all the way up to federal court. So this one probably has more of a paper trail than usual. So that might be, one worth looking into. So after you choose which book you want to do, you want to try to find a case or an instance where it was challenged or, banned or whatever, where you can find as much information about it as possible. And again, sometimes that's going to be easier than others, but always you want to, if you run into trouble, you can always ask us for help. Okay, so I know that was long for a video, but I wanted to try to show you as many of the resources on here as possible so that when you start searching, you're going to know what direction you're going in. But again, I'm Anna Mary. Sheila, one of our other librarians, has created videos on these next two tabs that you'll use for navigating those. And if you have any questions, you know where to find us. Thanks and good luck.